My name is Emily Carver, and what I'm about to tell you still sends shivers down my spine. It all started when I took a job at a small roadside motel in Harristown, Tennessee, a town barely a dot on the map, surrounded by endless woods and the kind of silence that gets under your skin. The kind of place people drive through without a second thought. But some people stop. And some of them shouldn't. I still remember the night he arrived. It was late, past midnight, when the Greyhound bus pulled into Harristown's tiny station. I was working the night shift at the Bluebird Motel, just like every other dead-end night in this town. Nobody ever came here unless they had a reason, and when he walked in, I knew he wasn't just passing through. He wasn't like the usual drifters. Dressed too neatly, like he belonged in a different time. His suit was clean, but the cut was a little old-fashioned. Sharp eyes, calm, unreadable. He leaned on the counter, slid some cash across the scratched wood, and said only 2 words, "One night." I handed him the key and watched as he walked down the dimly lit hallway. Something about him felt familiar. But I brushed the thought aside. A couple of hours later, he reappeared. This time, he wasn't so composed. "That article in my room," he said. "The missing boy. Who is he?" I frowned. Nobody asked about Nathan Parker. "You mean the kid who disappeared 15 years ago?" I said, keeping my voice even. "That was a long time ago. No one talks about it anymore." I expected him to drop it. Most people did. But he didn't. "And they never found him?" he asked. I met his gaze. "Nope. But some folks say he never really left." I could tell from his expression that he felt it too. That weight. That presence. I wanted to warn him. I really did. But what was the point? He wouldn't listen. He'd learn soon enough. The town always held its breath at night. I grew up here, and I still wasn't used to it. That silence. That creeping sense of being watched. He must have felt it too, because I saw him step outside for a cigarette. I watched from the lobby window as he stood there, scanning the empty streets. Then, his posture stiffened. He turned sharply, like he'd heard something. When he came back inside, he looked shaken. Maybe even scared. But he covered it well. I waited until I was sure no one else was around before I knocked on his door. "You shouldn't have asked about Nathan," I whispered. "The town, they don't like outsiders digging up the past." He studied me carefully. "What happened to him?" I hesitated. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, I said, "Some say the town made him disappear." He was asking too many questions. "Just like you." A muscle twitched in his jaw. He understood now. We left the motel together, walking through streets that felt too empty, too quiet. As we passed old buildings and dark alleyways, I saw the posters. Not just Nathan's. Others. New ones. The ink wasn't even faded. "How many have gone missing here?" he murmured. I swallowed. "Too many." A sound behind us. A footstep. He turned fast, scanning the darkness. No one was there. Then, in a low, steady voice, he said, "Run." And we did. I don't know what was chasing us that night. I don't know if it was the town itself, or something older, something darker. But I do know this, he didn't stay. By morning, he was gone. Just like Nathan. And I was left behind, still trapped in a town with too many secrets, wondering if one day, I'd be the next name on one of those posters. I never expected to see him again. A week had passed since Jack disappeared into the night, leaving nothing but questions and a lingering presence that refused to fade from my mind. The motel had been quieter than usual, but that didn't mean I was alone. Not really. It started 2 days after Jack left. The first man came in just after sunset. He was in his late 50s, his face weathered and scarred. He wore a heavy coat despite the warm Tennessee air. He didn't ask for a room. He just leaned against the counter, tapping his thick fingers against the wood, his cold gray eyes locked onto mine. "You had a visitor last week," he said, his voice like gravel. "Tall guy. Suit. Dark hair. Where'd he go?" I played dumb. Shrugged. "A lot of people come through here." The man didn't like that answer. His lip curled, and he leaned in closer. "He's not a lot of people. You know exactly who I'm talking about." I swallowed hard. "I don't know where he went." He studied me for a long moment, then nodded, like he had already decided something. "If he shows up again," he murmured, "you tell us first." I didn't respond, and after a tense pause, he turned and walked out. But he wasn't the last. Over the next few days, more men came, all cut from the same cloth, rough, dangerous, and looking for Jack. I kept my head down, but fear clawed at my stomach every time I saw headlights pull into the lot. And then, he came back. I heard the door chime at midnight, and when I looked up, there he was. Jack stood in the doorway, his dark eyes locking onto mine, the faintest smirk curling his lips. My breath caught, and before I could stop myself, I was around the counter, pressing myself against him. "Jesus, Jack," I whispered against his chest. "You left." "I came back." His voice was smooth, unreadable. His arms wrapped around me, firm but careful, like he wasn't sure how much I could handle. I pulled back, searching his face. "They were looking for you. Men. They came here." "I know." I stiffened. "What?" He exhaled, brushing a hand through his hair. "I've been busy." He glanced around the empty lobby before nodding toward the hallway. "Let's talk inside." In my room, with the door locked behind us, Jack sat on the edge of my bed and rubbed his hands together. For the first time, I noticed the bruises on his knuckles, the faint smear of dried blood on his sleeve. "I found him," he said finally. "Nathan Parker." A chill ran down my spine. "He's alive?" Jack shook his head. "He was murdered. A long time ago." His jaw clenched. "By the same man whose goons have been sniffing around this place." My breath hitched. "The ones who came here. His sons. His men." He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "They've been taking kids for years. Nathan was one of them. But he fought back. Asked too many questions. So they made him disappear." I swallowed the bile rising in my throat. "And you found them?" Jack's gaze lifted to mine, dark and unreadable. "I made them talk." I knew what that meant. I should have been afraid. But I wasn't. "Jack. They're done." He said it simply, like a statement of fact. "But they know I was here. They came looking for me. Which means they might come for you." I shivered, but then he was there, tilting my chin up with 2 fingers. "You're safe," he murmured. "I promise." I didn't know what came over me, but in that moment, I didn't care about the danger, the secrets, or the blood on his hands. I kissed him. Hard. And when he kissed me back, it was like the air had been knocked from my lungs. That night, we didn't sleep. Jack Harlow was an enigma, a man who existed in the spaces between shadows, but for a few hours, he was just mine. And I was his. By morning, he was gone. I woke to an empty bed, the sheets still holding his warmth. A strange ache settled in my chest, but before I could dwell on it, my eyes caught something on the front desk. A newspaper. I pulled it closer, my hands trembling. The headline made my stomach drop. "Lost children found, local authorities break case after years of disappearances." I scanned the article, my heart pounding. The details were vague, but the message was clear: Nathan Parker's fate had finally come to light. And with it, so had the truth about the others. The town was celebrating. There would be a festival in their honor. A hero hadn't stepped forward to claim responsibility. But I knew. I traced my fingers over the newspaper, my heart aching with something I couldn't name. Jack had come into this town a stranger, a ghost passing through. But he had left it changed. He had left me changed. And I had a feeling I'd see him again. Someday.
Jack may be here, maybe right next to you.